All right, welcome in. It's a Good Friday, happy Passover, any holiday that's active right now that you're celebrating. We appreciate you taking a break from that. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe you're taking a break from family and you're thinking, all right, MLB Live Before Locks on. Got to see Terry, got to see Eytan to a lesser extent, and hang with Mike Awesemo, who's producing. So hit the thumbs up button, please. As we always ask, make sure you're subscribed here. And Terry, unfortunately, we don't have a ton of time for me to just shoot shit with you for the next hour because we have 11 games to jump into in T-minus 60, my friend.
Yeah, we'll fly through these. We can talk fast. I'll make a point of not getting as crazy long-winded as I tend to get on some of these, especially when talking baseball. But good to be here with you, bud. Yeah, it's holiday-based weekend, I guess. That was kind of a surprise to me when I found out that it was Easter weekend. We're pushing our plans back with my family because it's my birthday week in 2 weeks. So we're just going to do it all then. We're going to have Easter. We're going to have my little birthday cake and all of that. But yeah, happy Easter, happy Passover, happy Barabbas Day to our pal Mike back there. He was telling us all about his awesome sounding holiday. If you're in the Philly area, you see a bunch of lunatics wearing Barabbas t-shirts, say hi to Mike for us tonight. He'll be out and about in Philly.
See, if we had time, I would ask you what the most memorable scene in a movie featuring a birthday cake is, but we don't have time for that. So I can't, unfortunately, man. Let's jump into it.
Because it's Erica Eleniak popping out of the cake in Under Siege for me. Oh, that was kind of a seminal moment. I was probably 12 or 13, and you know how those things go.
Look, outside of Steven Seagal breaking somebody's arm in Above the Law, I think that might be the most memorable thing ever seen in a Seagal movie. So
I think absolutely. So, for
sure. All right, brother, let's look at it. We've got the Yankees in Baltimore. We're going to bounce through these. There are going to be some that Terry just doesn't have a feel for or just wants to stay away from. So again, not all games, not all sides are created equal. We know that. Let's look at the Yankees, though. First here, we'll get into the Orioles as well. But just overall, you look at where our top stack percentage is, and the Yankees are right there at the top from a pitching standpoint. If there's anything on the line as far as with Baltimore, good luck there with Jordan Lyles, only because of where the Yankees are projected. But, if we want to just look at it from a team standpoint, right, top pitcher and stack with the Yankees first, not only are they right there at the top, Terry, but they're still a positive leverage team on our projections.
Yeah, Yanks top of the board on both sites. They're coming up a little bit negatively leveraged as the last time I uploaded this on the FanDuel slate, where they're getting a little bit more popularity than they are on DK, just because the way, some of the pricing comes together over there. Nice positively leveraged play just by a little bit. At this rate, if we're talking about this loaded Yankees lineup up and down, no Aaron Judge in the lineup tonight, but they're still, top 6 at least, top 7. You can throw Aaron Hicks in there. Kyle Higashioka is a capable catcher. So up and down this Yankees lineup, I'm not really sweating the ownership all that much because I can get to an Anthony Rizzo, 4.6% owned on DK, 10.8% on FanDuel. You've got a couple guys in double digits between him and DJ LeMahieu batting 5th, but DJ's down at sub 2% ownership on DK, sub 5% on FanDuel. Gleyber Torres is 10-ish% owned. Hicks drops back down below that 10% mark. So you can bounce around this lineup and still build low enough owned combinations. The meat of the order, Josh Donaldson, Joey Gallo, especially on FanDuel, they're both owned over 26%. That gets a little challenging. Stanton owned around 18%. 6% over there, but they just look like they're in a spectacular spot. Jordan Lyles, no resistance whatsoever, 19% strikeout rate over 180 innings last season, a 4.73 xFIP, a 1.39 whip. Most concerningly for him, 41.6% hard hit rate, 9.1% barrel rate on a 15.3 degree average launch angle. There's going to be some home runs hit by these Yankees tonight. So we'll see where they come from. But yeah, you want to have some Yankee stacks. If you want to undercut the fields, it's probably not even necessary. I think if you come in around the field, maybe even get a little above the field on the DK slate. On FanDuel, you could consider an undercut. Their total ownership share is 17.6%. If you're dancing around the 25% owned guys, you're probably okay to ride around that number. But I can understand going a little bit under it on the FanDuel slate. And then you mentioned the pitchers as well. Jordan Montgomery rates up near the top of our board in the top pitchers tool. He was the 4th ranked pitcher on the DK slate, 4th ranked on FanDuel as well. He's overowned on the FanDuel slate. He's overowned on the DK slate in terms of his ownership to his probability of success. I'll throw in that the Orioles are sneaky good against left-handed pitching. It didn't work out the last time when I wrote them up that day. But looking at this active roster, 2% better than average creating runs against lefties last season. A 174 collective ISO was 9th best in baseball. A 3.57 home run rate was 9th best in baseball. So they've got a little bit of sneaky power. They've got a little bit of ability to create runs against left-handed pitching. So I don't necessarily know if I'm as on board with Jordan Montgomery, particularly negatively leveraged, super popular Jordan Montgomery here. I probably like it a little bit better on DK, where 30% ownership isn't as bad as I think the 17% ownership on the single pitcher would be on him.
You mentioned Baltimore, just to follow up real quick, good against lefties and an opportunity tonight. Probably not going to get to a ton, if much, but they are right at the bottom there. So if you were looking to even build smaller stacks and maybe take advantage of anything with this specific circumstance, could you get to some of that with Baltimore?
Yeah, I could. It depends on how lineups come together, but this is a team. They're not expensive. I just ran off some of the numbers. Cedric Mullins is a great option up top. 30-30 season. He was the 21st 30-30 season since 1901 when the American League was founded last year. Kind of gets under discussed at the top of the lineup. Switch hitter, very capable. Ryan Mountcastle, Trey Mancini, and Anthony Santander, Austin Hayes. I'm interested in all 4 of those hitters. And then even like a Jorge Mateo, not a great on-base guy, 293 on-base percentage last season. He's in a regular role this year. He might be able to get on base. If he gets that even up into like the 315, 320 range, he's going to steal 40 bases this year. He's got just blazing speed. So with their acumen against left-handed pitching, Montgomery's not a typical pitcher who typically gets completely lit up, but he's not a super high-end strikeout guy, 24.5% strikeout rate last season. So he puts guys on base, 1.28 whip. I think there's enough on the bone there to go to the Orioles. You don't have to go crazy with it. They're very low owned. They're positively leveraged. They are at the bottom of the board by probability, but it's a 2% mark. And it's on a board where if you go from the bottom at 2% to the, let's say, 5th ranked team, they're only at 7.6%. So it's not like we're sacrificing a team that's 25% likely to be the top scorer. It's kind of a plateau of probability today.
It makes sense, especially when you look at how large of a slate there is. But as you referenced, the gap is very thin between even the top teams there. And by the way, the Yankees updated are just below the Angels, and they are now just a little bit at minus 0.7. We have projected for their leverage, updated at what I did on DK. So just wanted to get that out there for you as well. All right, let's keep it moving, my friend, as we go on to Oakland here. And be it the implied run total, 4.6 out there, maybe it's the matchup or just kind of where we have the A's projected. You can gain some leverage here, but I don't know if the implied run total may be enough to maybe move you away from looking at bigger stacks with the A's.
Yeah, the A's they've been interesting. Somebody said it in our Discord the other day, and they said, I think the A's are better than everybody expected, or better than we think. I said, yeah, that's typically the case with this team. They managed to put together a lineup effectively. They've got their Moneyball philosophies and everything over there, and they're very good at doing that. I don't know that they're a good enough team, even though they're better than we expected. There's a couple bats in here that I don't mind. Tony Kemp has a nice hit tool. Jed Lowry, we all kind of know what Jed Lowry is. Sean Murphy's got a good amount of power. in the middle of that lineup, as does Seth Brown. Murphy's hitting third, Brown's hitting sixth. If you want to put those guys together with either the guys up at the top or with a Billy McKinney and Sheldon Neuse, one of the favorites of Discord because he's a friend of our guy Woody in the Discord. If you want to get to those bats, those are the effective bats in this lineup. You get some decent barrel rates from last year, some decent quality contact metrics. It's just not my favorite stack. They're very low owned though, and they're inexpensive. So you can get there against Ross Stripling, 21.8% strikeouts last year, 4.59 xFIP, 127 whip. Definitely going to be plenty of opportunity. He also add on top of that a 10.2% barrel rate and 40% hard hit rate allowed. So definitely Stripling is a targetable pitcher here. It's just, I don't think all that much of this A's lineup. So a couple under-owned shares, but nothing to get crazy about. You're muted.
That's my fault. So I wonder overall, when you look at this game, and I get it, like there are 11 games on the slate, so you can be choosy, if you will, here. But if it's the Texas bats, you can talk about a little more depth, that you have zero, like you're losing a ton of leverage if you're looking for the Texas stack, or if it's the Oakland bats who are just projected kind of in that middle of the pack to lower pack. And I get it, like there's that narrow window. Even the pitchers, you mentioned Stripling, like both of these pitchers are not projected high at all when it comes to our top pitchers tool, even our top two on DK. So I don't know how much you're forcing this game overall, Terry.
So I do like the Blue Jays side of this going up against Dalton Jeffries here. It's nothing really to worry about there in terms of the pitching matchup. And this is a spectacular lineup. The Jays are just, they draw fair ownership across the board. They're slightly negatively leveraged against their probability on DK, slightly on FanDuel. But I'm interested in those hitters, right? It's just a much, much better lineup. George Springer, Bo Bichette, Vladdy, Lourdes Gurriel, Matt Chapman. Even on the bottom end, Raimel Tapia, there's some speed and some hit tool there. I don't really need to go out of my way for Santiago Espinal or Zach Collins, but as a wraparound from the bottom of the lineup, Kevin Biggio is kind of interesting. I know he's been kind of a disappointment overall, limited contact numbers, a 224, 322, 356 last year, only 7 home runs, but I believe in the talent. So if you wanted to use him as a low-owned wraparound back up to, Springer, Bichette, Vladdy, those guys are going to be owned in the low to mid-teens. And then you get really different by doing something like that with Biggio while filling a premium position. He's got multi-position eligibility on FanDuel. He's 2,100 over there. So I think there's something to be done there. It's just a matter of trying to get a little bit different with it. They do suffer from no Teoscar Hernandez in that lineup, but it's still a very, very strong lineup. So if that's going to push people away in this matchup, I'm happy to grab some Blue Jays here. And to your point, yeah, the A stack is definitely positively leveraged. They're in the middle of the board. Like I said before, it's kind of a plateau of a board today where a lot of the probabilities look the same. So I do want to grab some of these positively leveraged teams, but I don't necessarily want to be grabbing shares of positively leveraged A's when I have options like the Braves and the Astros also coming at positive leverage, not to mention the Cubbies playing in Coors Field, albeit against a very good pitcher. You're still getting Coors Field at a positive leverage score today. So there's only so many shares to go around. I just don't know how many I've got in my pocket for the A's.
All right, let's move on because this game features, especially where we have with our top pitchers tool, an interesting matchup. Giants in Cleveland. So San Fran Giants versus the Guardians. I don't know if you're used to that yet, but a decent implied run total, at least you could work with here with San Fran. Cleveland, maybe not so much, but again, that could open up a pitching matchup. So let's start there. Rodon, please, Zach. Let's look at how you're approaching either or maybe both of these pitchers, especially if you're looking at it from a FanDuel standpoint, because as I mentioned here, these guys are going to be rated more so higher than not where we have the field.
Yeah, Rodon top of the board on both sites today, and I think it's justified. The guy had a spectacular year last year. The only thing that stops this guy from contending for Cy Youngs is his limited ability to stay on the mound. 132 2/3 last year was the most he had thrown since 2016, I think, when he threw like 165. But in that sample, 34.6% strikeout rate, a 3.17 xFIP, a 0.96 whip, 15% swinging strike rate. Carlos Rodon is spectacular. He is an excellent lefty. I loved this spot for him too when he signed with the Giants. I think it's a great match of team and player, and I expect if he gives us 165, 170 innings this season, he's going to be on that that short list. So knock wood he stays healthy. In this spot against the Guardians, I definitely think there's some upside here. Plenty of strikeouts to chase in this lineup. There's a few guys who are very good at limiting the strikeout, like Jose Ramirez in this lineup. But overall, you've got a Franmil Reyes who strikes out 30% of the time in there. You've got an Owen Miller who's a 26.7% strikeout rate, and Austin Hedges at the back end of the lineup. So I think there's plenty for Rodon to do here. He's highly owned, but it's totally justified in my mind. So I like going to Carlos Rodon. He's one of 3 ace level pitchers though. So you can kind of play the ownership game around Rodon, around Freddie Peralta, and around Dylan Cease today. And then if you're looking for SP2s on the DK slate, Plesac's on the board. He's getting a little bit more ownership than his probability of being a top 2 starter. He's a $6,500 option. He's never a pitcher I get excited about rostering, but for cost, could he get out there and give you some innings and just carve through enough to give you a reasonably effective score at that price as an SP2? He could, but we're talking about a 16.7% strikeout rate pitcher last year, a 4.77 xFIP. There's not a lot to love. I'm much more inclined to go toward the Giants bats when they're all basically in single digits ownership.
The only reason why I ask is because there's a 2 percentage point difference between the 4th top pitcher on FanDuel in Montgomery, who we talked about, and Plesac, who's right there. If you just look at it overall on our top pitchers tool, kind of in the middle. But again, there isn't that much different. Now, the pay-up options are going to be, as you mentioned, Rodon, Cease, and Peralta by all means. But can you get to Plesac at all on FanDuel when you look at just how little of a gap there is between number 4 and really halfway to the bottom?
I think if I'm playing on the FanDuel slate, I think I'm chasing just some of those higher end pitchers. If I'm going away from any of the top 3, like there's just so much that I want to get to Rodon, Peralta, and Dylan Cease. Yep. And then when I'm spreading shares around from there, we've got Tariq Skubal on the board, and he's coming at like fair ownership here. Herman Marquez, I definitely want to have some shares of, despite the fact that game's in Coors Field. There's nobody on him, and I think he's a very, very talented pitcher. Plesac's just, there's not enough strikeout there for me. He, I guess, could chase the win and the quality start bonus, but it's really, really thin if we're going that route on the FanDuel slate. I like him. I think he's more in play on DK, where you can just use that cheap price as an SP2. Plesac last year, 9 quality starts in 25 tries. Not the greatest conversion rate in terms of the quality starts, the depth, 36%. So not really somebody I'm looking to chase on FanDuel.
Look, you mentioned the Giants bats. You have a positive leverage score. You want to work them on DK. And maybe what would be interesting to see is how much you think you could get to anybody with Cleveland, knowing that there's that low run probability that we have projected here, 3.9. But because they're at the bottom, because they have such a low run projection probability, part of me, if any of these guys, a couple of these guys, a 3-4 man stack produce, you might be winning some tournaments tonight.
Yeah, and I think they're at least worthy of taking a couple shares out, right? I don't want to go completely overboard with grabbing Guardians here because they are at the bottom of the board. And you do have a situation where you're talking about a premium strikeout pitcher against some of their best hitters and their best power bats. A guy like Franmil Reyes in the middle of that lineup are the strikeout targets. So if he's going out of there and just taking the bat out of Franmil's hand 3 times while he's hitting cleanup behind some of the guys who might be on base because of their low strikeouts, good hit tools, I don't know that it plays well for the stack. So I will take out a couple shares, particularly because you're attacking near 30% ownership on FanDuel on Rodon and near 40% on DK. So I do want to have a couple insurance policies against my Rodon ownership and a couple leverage stacks against the field that will have Rodon, but I don't think you want to go crazy with it. And I think you want to focus around the premium bats, the Jose Ramirez, Franmil, as much as he strikes out. If he doesn't strike out, he very well might hit a home run today. Ahmed Rosario in the middle of that lineup. Maybe you get away with some, no, it's lefty. So I wouldn't even look at Josh Naylor. I was going to call out some sneaky power there, but maybe not. Owen Miller, I know, has been a darling of some people early on in the season. I don't know if I really believe in it. Austin Hedges, where you need a catcher, maybe, but it's really around like Jose Ramirez, Franmil, maybe a 3-4-5, just 3-man stack works from this lineup.
So let's move right to our next game. And then this is interesting because a similar scenario here with Rasmussen, although he's going to be a little more clearly than Plesac, but you also have one of the 3 guys that you referenced, Terry, as far as the ace guys that you're going to be paying up for on the slate, and Dylan Cease. So looking at the pitching matchup first, Cease is going to get a ton of conversation, although technically when you look at leverage of the 3, he's got the least ownership on DK across the board. I wonder if it's just too much at 8,000 on DK to take a risk on Rasmussen routinely, especially when you're not getting a ton of ownership and you're still not getting as much value on the return.
Yeah, on the Rasmussen side of things, I believe in the talent. Let me pull up. He went 4 innings in the last start. Just with the way that that team uses their pen and has multi-inning arms in their pen, I'd be a little concerned about some limitations on the pitch count. And it looks like that's kind of coming through in where we've got him projected, where he's projecting out in my model here. I also don't love the matchup going up against this White Sox lineup. They're one of the best lineups in baseball against either hand. So I don't love grabbing shares of them at 5,500 on FanDuel and 8,000 on DK. Those are very different prices. I could maybe talk myself into a couple shares on FanDuel. Where do we have them ranked on the FanDuel board? That's a weird one because it's the single pitcher site, 4% probable top value. I could maybe grab a couple shares because if he is getting 5 and he gets through 5, the strikeouts are there. There's certainly some strikeouts in this lineup. Nobody's egregiously bad in strikeouts, but nobody's limiting strikeouts into the teens. Everybody's in the 20s. So there are some strikeouts there. He could get through cleanly. I just don't know if I need to chase it. There's so many options though. He's super cheap. That's what I like. That 5,500. Now you're talking about I can stack whoever I want, but it might be it might be a trap with only 5 innings on at the outside. So I don't love that. The C side of it, I absolutely want to be a part of.
Well, he's the most expensive. DK, you're going to be paying, 10-2.
Yeah.
Not third though on FanDuel. So I imagine that while you have Rodon, who we just talked about, Peralta, we'll get to that matchup as well against St. Louis. If you were looking at just countering the field with a guy who's projected pretty similar to the top 2 guys, you have some pretty good opportunity to work Cease and FanDuel. Not to say you can't on DK, because as I mentioned, he's still the 3rd highest owned guy on projected on DK. Pardon me. He's just the highest paid guy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Cease was, to pat myself on the back for a minute, at the beginning of last season, one of my better calls for the season. I really liked him to have that breakout year. And honestly, he even exceeded my expectations. I was kind of saying, hey, this kid's going to harness it. We're going to see him rack up some strikeouts this year. It'll still be bumpy. And he is a Cy Young contender now, like legitimately. He went out through 165 and 2/3, 31.9% strikeout rate, 3.72 xFIP, a 1.25 whip. He still put too many guys on base, 9.6% walks. He still allowed a little bit of premium contact, 9.9% barrel rate, 38.5% hard hit. So there's actually room for improvement on Dylan Cease, and I fully expect it. He was a guy who had just phenomenal stuff, and it was about command and control. So as he develops, he's just going to get sharper and sharper. 14.8% swinging strike rate. I love the spot for him. It's a Tampa Bay lineup. Don't get me wrong. They're really capable against righties last year. The active roster compiled a 193 ISO, which is 5th best in baseball. They were 11% better than average creating runs, which is 2nd best. They had a 3.72 home run rate, which was 7th best overall, but they struck out 24.4% of the time against righties, 22nd in baseball. So I think there's plenty of strikeouts here on the table for Dylan Cease. I think I'm happy to go with 15% ownership. He's the 3rd highest owned out of those aces and the third from the top of the board in terms of cost. That was clunky. So I definitely want to get to Cease on FanDuel and probably going to be my highest owned pitcher over there. And then on the DK slate, I'm happy to pay for him. I think he's fine at that ownership mark and at that price. So definitely want to have some Dylan Cease tonight.
Is there any lean on the bats? I mean, it's pretty much an identical score here. The only difference that you're getting when you look at the White Sox and Tampa stacks are just cost. And it's not even that huge of a difference between costs. So maybe this is just about not wanting to go up against Cease and taking advantage of the White Sox stack, that you're still going to get a positive leverage score.
I tell you what, based on the walk rate that Cease has, there's some patient hitters who draw walks really well in that Tampa lineup. So the way that they approach the game, it could be worthwhile to grab a few Tampa stacks, and you don't have to go crazy with it. Everybody on DK, 0.5% ownership, everybody on FanDuel below 3% ownership. So you grab a few insurance policies against Dylan Cease, especially if you go overboard with owning Dylan Cease. And I think that makes some sense. There's some good bats there. Brandon Lau, Wander Franco, Randy Rosareno off the top of the batting order. You could include G-Man Choi. You could include Yandy Diaz. You could go to Josh Lowe, the premium rookie. I even like adding in Manny Margot, the 1 through 9. You can play this lineup 1 through 9. They're not bad. It's just the strikeout rate. I mentioned all the good offensive numbers against right-handed pitching. With the amount of base runners that Dylan Cease provides to opposing offenses, there's certainly a reason to stack them. So yeah, you can go that route. The White Sox lineup against Drew Rasmussen, definitely, I think there's plenty of reason to go to them too. Everybody under 1% owned on both sites. Not really understanding that unless it's just cost-based, but it's a spectacular lineup, one of the best in baseball. Timmy Anderson, Luis Robert, Jose Abreu, Yasmani Grandal, Eloy Jimenez. That top 5 is as good as any team in baseball right now, and nobody's going there. So definitely sign me up for some White Sox. And the back end of the lineup is not bad. There's a few bolt-on pieces that are usable over there too. So definitely both of these offenses I'm going to have some of.
All right, man, let's keep it moving here. And we go to the Angels and Rangers. And now we're talking 2 teams for the first time with implied run totals each over 5. Angels going to be one to work with as well, 5-5, Rangers 5-1. So maybe we should start with the bats first. We could start with the Angels, who I know are waiting, just like I'm waiting in Philly for bats to come alive. They're waiting for more than Mike Trout to hit 2 home runs so far.
Yeah, I tell you, I wrote up this Angels stack today. I really like the spot here. Matt Bush on the mound and Reed Detmers on the opposing mound. That's the reason that this game has a matching total to the Coors game, right? There's going to be some offense here. The Angels stack is interesting to me because while they're at the top of our board, they were pulling negative leverage on both sites the last I looked. Slightly negative on the DK slate, and as of the last update, slightly negative on the FanDuel slate as well. But a lot of that is just on Ohtani and Trout, right? Both of those guys, Ohtani pushing 20% ownership on DK, Trout at 15. Everybody else on the team is at 7.8% for Rendon or below. So you can definitely go to these Angels bats and just use some of these other guys to offset that popularity on Trout and Ohtani. If everybody's just, concentrated so much on those 2 guys, a lot of one-off ownership for the 2 superstars, totally warranted. Spectacular spot for both of them. It's very similar on FanDuel. Jared Walsh and Anthony Rendon are drawing some additional ownership over there. They're both owned in like the 13-14% range, but I definitely think it's worthwhile. The back end of the lineup leaves something to be desired, but like Tyler Wade's useful in terms of getting on base, maybe stealing some bases. Max Stassi, where you need catchers, definitely has a nice contact profile and some power. So I don't mind getting to a decent amount of Angel stacks despite the popularity on Ohtani and Trout. To answer your question, I think Ohtani, I think this is the breakout night for him. He is topping my home run model. He was my home run pick for the day.
Wow.
So I love the Ohtani call. I hate going chalky, but I've missed the last couple of days. So I wanted to grab a chalky one and maybe get off the schneid after a couple rough ones. But I love the Ohtani and Trout spot, and Jared Walsh and Anthony Rendon are both spectacular hitters as well. On the Rangers side, going up against Reed Detmers, no reason not to love this improved Rangers offense there as well. A little bit less popular in overall, but probably a lower priority for me. Semien, Corey Seager, Mitch Garver, Adolis Garcia, definitely a nice top end. I don't love the back end. Nate Lowe gives you a nice contact profile, and he's cheap. Andy Ibanez, Nick Solak, Charlie Culberson, Eli White, take them or leave them. So it's really about the top end of the Rangers, but that's where all the popularity is. So they're a mid-range priority for me.
So I get the matchup, and look, I'm not even going to try this with Detmers, but I maybe you could work this with Bush here, and if you're building a bunch. But hear me out. We're still waiting, right? And that's part of it, which is I get it that it should be a big night for Ohtani. I'm going to love the home run call. Trout, we're all rooting for him here in Philly as well. Like, I get it. Like, there should, like Rendon, there should be this arrival here tonight against Bush. But if things continue to be somewhat sluggish, could you counter that and counter the field by getting to some Bush tonight?
I can't imagine, as much as I like getting to Bush any night. I can't imagine that that's the play.
I opened the door for you, Terry.
You really did. Set spike, put it on the tee, knock it out of the park, whatever you want to say. But yeah, this is not the spot. You're talking about a 36-year-old career reliever. He has never had a start in his career. He was drafted as a premium prospect. The guys on the strategy show talked about it this morning. Got into a lot of legal trouble, hit and run, whole kinds of big mess. Making his first career start. I don't think we're actually going to get very many innings out of him either. I think he's probably acting more as the lead into a bullpen game here. So he's not on the board for me, despite the 4,800. I get what you're after there, but I never like to grab a terrible pitcher and just be like, all right, it's just throwing him against that ownership. If anything, like maybe the stack fails because they only score 4 or 5 runs, but I still think they're going to put a couple hard hit balls on Matt Bush here.
Fair enough. I have to ask. I had to do it justice. at the very least. All right. So Cardinals, Brewers, as we keep it moving. Look, if you're hanging with us, we're flying through this 11-game slate. So we love that you're a part of what we're doing. Just hit that thumbs up button, please. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed so you get that notification bell lit as well. And you're never missing the start of shows. And now you're jammed in here halfway through asking if we covered the Orioles Yankees game. Yes, Terry did actually pretty well. So exactly. You want to make sure that you're here from the jump, especially if we have these large slate shows where we're just flying through everything. So please hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you're subscribed here. Odd Shopper, we're constantly talking about bets, placing bets, home run models. We're all using Odd Shopper. We're not just talking about Odd Shopper. We're all using Odd Shopper. I don't care if it's Terry giving a home run pick or me giving 3-point props in a play-in game on Twitter. We're using Odd Shopper, so you should as well. All right, brother, we keep it moving here. And, you know, you just had me with the volleyball thing. I was thinking, wow, this would be another opportunity if we had a 5-game slate where I could bring up C. Thomas Howell, Side Out. And if there's ever a better movie to represent one sport than Side Out and volleyball, but we don't have time, so I can't. Cardinals in Milwaukee. This is the other one, right? We've talked now 2 of 3 of the big name guys that you can get to on the mound tonight. Freddie Peralta is the third. So let's start there with the pitching matchup. Peralta, where we have him, is going to be right there at the top as well. And then kind of how much you're looking at, if at all. Skubal on the other side, although both of these teams don't really have a super high projected run total. Both are under 5, kind of in that 4.5 range.
Yeah. To answer your question from before, I think maybe I would throw American Flyers, the Kevin Costner bike racing movie, into that mix alongside Side Out. Both spectacular movies from way back in the day that were on cable all the time. From this game, I really like Freddie Peralta as a pitcher in general. 33.6% strikeout rate over 144 and a third innings last year, a .97 whip, 3.66 xFIP. The Brewers have a ridiculously good pitching staff, and Freddie Peralta is a big part of it. The thing I like best about him, in addition to all those numbers, in addition to the 14.5% swinging strike rate, the 31.3% CSW percentage, a 6% barrel ball rate, and a 31.1% hard hit percentage last year. Just spectacularly good at limiting premium contact. Righty going up against a heavily right-handed Cardinals lineup that struggles for power against righties, struggles for run creation against righties. I love the spot for him. The one thing that the Cardinals are going to limit is the strikeout upside to a degree. They're very good at limiting strikeouts against right-handed pitching in general. They do have a couple targetable guys, like Tyler O'Neill is going to swing and miss a lot of the time. He's also going to hit the ball out of the park a lot of the time this year. And Freddie Peralta, I think, has enough strikeout acumen that it won't be a limiting factor for him. So I love the spot for him. 12% owned on FanDuel. I'll be over the field over there. 24% owned on DK as of the last update I did. I think he's worth getting over the field on over there. Nice spot for Freddie Peralta here.
All right. So I'm sorry. I don't know why I brought up Peralta. I'm just putting this in the Slack because you and Awesome, y'all are like, what the hell is this guy doing here? I brought up Peralta, the Cardinals Brewers game, and mentioned Peralta and then referenced everybody else in the next game. So the other side of that would be with St. Louis. And I guess really how much you're looking at the Brewers stack here as well. I mean, when we look at our tools, we told you there at the start, you really have a couple of teams at the top, and then anybody who's kind of in that middle range isn't really out of it. You get a little positive leverage with that Milwaukee stack. You're going to get a lot more positive leverage with St. Louis. So I don't know how much you're looking at the bats from either a production standpoint or even if it's just leverage.
Milwaukee's a little bit interesting. They're, if you want to tell me that we're stacking against Miles Mikolas here, 16.7% strikeout rate over a limited 44 2/3 last year, puts guys on base. I have no issues with that. I think they're maybe a little bit under-owned. You're getting 8.1% on DK on Rowdy Tellez, everybody else in the 5% or lower range, including Christian Yelich, including Andrew McCutchen, including Hunter Renfroe. On the FanDuel slate, Willy Adames, 8.9% is the highest owned player. So up and down this lineup, there's some quality that is under-owned against a pitcher who's not very good and who should, at the very least, he's not going to be striking anybody out. So there should be a lot of contact, a lot of bat on ball here for the Brewers, and not a lot of guys getting sat down by the strikeout. I think it's an underrated spot here. So I'd be putting those hitters that I just named together. If you wanted to throw like a Lorenzo Cain on from the back end, if you want to throw on Omar Narvaez where you need a catcher, perfectly fine with that as well. I would probably also grab a few insurance policies from the cards. It's interesting. Each of the premium pitchers, I do like the offenses on the other side. So I think it is worth grabbing an insurance policy or two against each one of them. And they're, again, with the cards, they're all owned under 1%. So just go in there, grab a Dylan Carlson, Goldschmidt, O'Neill, Arenado, Paul DeYoung, Corey Dickerson, whoever's in the lineup in the middle there, maybe Tommy Edman as a wraparounds. Grab a couple of those against your Peralta shares, but I think Peralta's the stronger side.
All right, let's move to KC here. Tigers, Royals, and Kansas City. And now, Tariq Skubal, as I mentioned, Brad Keller is going to be the other guy before we get to the bats here. And both are picking up the same level ownership that we have projected, just in that 10 share range. Again, this is a larger slate, so depending on how much that's going to impact. And there's not that much of a difference either that we have ranked here as far as the top two pitchers on DK really across the board. So maybe it's cost, maybe it's matchup, but do you side really with either, you think, more here when you're building rosters tonight and lineups tonight, Terry, only because there isn't that much of a difference on our projected metrics between the two outside of the 1,200 on DK and then the cost difference on FanDuel as well.
Yeah, I'm not really there with Keller anymore. Off of his one decent year a couple years ago where his basic skill was keeping the ball on the ground and he got a little bit lucky, limited run scoring upside, but there wasn't even many strikeouts on the board for him then. And he dropped last year in terms of the strikeout rate down to 19.6%, a 4.56 xFIP. His ground ball rates fell apart by, I think, 5 percentage points lower, 1.66 whip. This is over 133 and 2/3 too. It's not like it's a small sample bias. 25.4% call plus swinging strike rate is just pathetic. 10.9% barrel rate is extreme. 44.3% hard hit is ridiculously high. So I think there's every good reason in the world to take a look at the Tigers again here. I wrote up the Tigers yesterday, I think, and nobody's going back to them here against what I think is a bad pitcher that's getting a little bit too much ownership on the DK slate. I know he's 7,000. He could go out there and have an effective, get through some innings kind of a start, but I don't expect him to go out and rack up a ton of strikeouts here. So I don't actually like going to Keller there.
What's up? See what he is on FanDuel?
He's 9,400 on FanDuel.
What am I missing on that? And he's getting 2.3% ownership.
I don't know what those people are doing. And I was going to round that point off by saying his 9,400 on FanDuel is just inexplicable to me. I do not understand why he's priced there.
We always defer to you on this show, but I mean, even I know that's a fucking mistake and a half.
Yeah. I don't know where they came up with that number. Maybe they accidentally just used the stats from a few years ago. And even then that wouldn't have been justifiable. So
right. No FanDuel, idea. They're going to correct it. Right. Exactly. From a bat standpoint, and you mentioned that as far as, this is where I imagine you just want to take advantage of the Detroit stack because of Keller. Is there anything on the flip side, right? Because that makes sense as much as you're fading Keller, cost or matchup. So the Detroit stack, but what about the Kansas City? Is there anything you can get with there as confident or not as you may be in Skubal tonight?
Yeah, that one I think I want both sides of. I think I'll grab some Skubal. I'll try and get beyond the field. He's only 6.5% owned on the FanDuel slate, 9.8% on the DK slate. Might have gone up a little bit, but negligibly since I updated this. He's a premium pitcher. He's got a lot of really good stuff. He needs to bring down his contact profile pretty extremely. He struck out 25.9% of hitters in 29 starts over 149 and a third last year. So that gives you an idea of the lack of depth as well. That's also been a problem for him. 13.9% barrel rate, though, to put more of a button on it. 45.1% hard hit rate, 14.1 degree average launch angle. He becomes problematic. It was something like a 5% plus home run rate last season. So there's a little bit of concern around the power. He is a premium strikeout option, but there are a lot of guys in this Kansas City lineup who their one real skill is limiting strikeouts. So it's kind of a both sides are for me. I can grab some bats around a Whit Merrifield, Bobby Witt, Sal Perez, Andrew Benintendi, Carlos Santana stack. If you wanted to go to Adalberto Mondesi down the bottom of the lineup, there's always that speed option and decent contact or decent home run profile, decent contact profile. On the Tigers side of things, it's definitely a stack that I'm interested in because they're low owned. So yeah, you want to get to both sides of the offenses. And I definitely want to have more Skubal in the field those.
And a reminder here, not just to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to what we're doing on the Awesemo DFS Odd Shopper channel as well. But look, if you want to be a part of all this and not have to wait 1 day a week for free tools, you can just sign up. We have these links below. So jump on. The Awesemo Plus weekly pass is $29.95. You're going to get player projections, ownership projections, top golfers, lineup builders, everything. So the MLB Plus package is $4.95, as low as that a week, but you can get the whole thing for $29.95. That weekly pass right there is insane. You can just do it for everything. We have it across the board, so you don't have to wait once a week here. I think we were good in KC. Was there anything else that you wanted to throw out?
No, I think we covered that one pretty well.
Okay.
Get to both sides on the bats and Scooble on the pitching.
A lot of bats here in course. As you mentioned, we have one other game that has this high of an implied run total simply because of the pitching matchup. In this case, it has a lot to do with the location. Stroman, Marquez, well, let's get to that just because of the high run projection that we have for both teams. Does that impact, or how, I guess is probably the better way to phrase this, Terry, does that impact you getting to Stroman and Marquez tonight?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's basically the opposite of that other situation that we saw in Texas, where these two pitchers are actually pretty good. So it's actually probably keeping that score down. Like if we swapped the pitchers and took those Texas pitchers, this would be like a 14-run total in Coors Field, right? So I think it's all about the quality of the pitching that's keeping a lot of people away from both the Cubs and the Rockies. The Rockies are, last I saw, technically slightly negatively leveraged, while the Cubs were still pulling positive leverage. This seems like a situation where I want to be on both sides on the offense, and I want to have some Herman Marquez shares. I don't necessarily need to get to Stroman. He's a pitcher I've never really found success with at DFS. He's a much better real life pitcher than a DFS pitcher. To put a point on it, 21.6% strikeouts over 33 pretty good starts in real life last season. 3.57 xFIP, was decent at keeping runners off base, but the 21.6% strikeouts is just not a lot of upside there. Throw in Coors Field. I don't need to get to the visiting pitcher, who's only, I think, pitched there 2 or 3 times in his career. And he pitched well when he was there. Not that I like to focus in on individual results like this, but I'm bringing it up because his stuff actually doesn't profile like stuff that would work there. Think back to like Mike Hampton with a sinker baller pitcher and the disaster that he was there. Vertical movement typically doesn't work very well in Coors Field. And that's kind of what Stroman's arsenal is built around in a lot of ways. So I don't love the spot for him, even though he has been effective in the past. He's super low owned, so there's no problem with taking a few shots against what is a pretty bad Rockies lineup. Herman Marquez, on the other hand, definitely interesting. If you look at his splits home road for his entire career, he's 24.2% strikeouts on the road, 23.2% at home. He walks fewer hitters at home. He walks I reversed those. 24.2% strikeout at home, 23 on the road, walks more hitters, 7.1% versus 6.5, a lower xFIP at home, 3.42 to 3.80, 3.82 FIP to a 3.88. I like Herman Marquez in all situations when I can get him against what I don't think is a very good Cubs lineup and is one with a lot of strikeouts in it. I'm happy to take some shots here. Own 2% of the time on FanDuel. I can easily exploit that at 8,200, 7.4% for 7,900 on DK. I can grab some extra Herman Marquez shares here and throw him against this Cubs lineup, but I will have some Cubs bats going back the other way.
All right, so now, let's look at that a little bit deeper here as far as the bats and how much you're looking to exploit what we have. And look, again, the Yankees last projected here, going to be right there at the top, back and forth with the Angels and Dodgers, but there's not much of a dip. There's not a ton of dip between where Colorado is at the very least. So the stacks, the bats, how does that factor in now? As you mentioned, the pitching matchup, a tough one for these offenses. It's just the location that's bumping up the run total.
Yeah. So the way that I typically end up playing Coors Field is when it's like it was the other day where 20-30% of the field was on the top bats and everybody in this game. I was mostly not there. I had a few shares of both teams, but I wasn't really all over it. When everybody's owned in the single digits at Coors Field, sign me up. I don't care who the pitchers are. I just talked glowingly about Herman Marquez. I absolutely want to grab some shares of Wilson Contreras, Ian Happ, Seiya Suzuki, Frank Schwindel, Patrick Wisdom. Grab some of those bats against him at Coors Field. They're all owned under, call it 8%. Most of them in the 2 to 5% range. Same story is true about the Rockies on the other side of this one. Give me some shares of Connor Joe, Charlie Blackmon, Chris Bryant, CJ Cron, Ryan McMahon through the middle of that lineup. I could even get on board with some shares of Sam Hilliard as a lefty going up against Marcus Stroman here. Hilliard had a 15% barrel rate, 38.6% hard hit in not a giant sample last season, but I do believe in that bat. So I think there's good reason to go to the Rockies at fairly low ownership, the Cubbies at fairly low ownership. Anytime Coors is under owned, it's a spot where you want to attack it. Anytime it's over owned, you go away from it.
All right, Braves in San Diego, decent, but not super high here. We've got a couple more games, two more teams in that 5 projected run total, but Braves, Padres kind of in that bottom 4 range. We've got Wright and Gore on the mound here. It's Mackenzie Gore's debut. So are you trying to take advantage of that, at least with Atlanta? And if so, how much?
I'll probably have shares of this Braves team on every single slate all year long, unless it's a COVID disaster and a replacement team comes in. This lineup's just too good. They were, among baseball's best last season. Multiple, 4 guys in the projected lineup with 30 plus home runs last year, 4 guys with 30 plus, with 100 plus ribbies. You get a guy like Matt Olson replacing Freddie Freeman in this lineup, hitting second in the projected, created runs 46% better than average last season, got on base at a 371 clip, while also hitting 39 home runs. Spectacular contact profiles up and down this lineup. I bring him up every time I possibly can. Dansby Swanson is one of the most underrated players in the game, let alone shortstops. 2,800, he's owned 0.5% of the time on FanDuel, 3,900, 0.5% ownership on DK. Yes, please. Dansby Swanson has a great contact profile, hit 27 home runs completely under the radar with a 201 ISO last season. Up and down the Braves lineup, you can definitely get there going up against a rookie pitcher making his debut. Gore is a premium pitching prospect, definitely one of the more regarded arms in baseball, but taking these Braves, especially against the lefty, I'm happy to do that here. Maybe he comes out and strikes out the world. They are a high-end strikeout opportunity for him. That's why he's drawing some ownership at 5,000 on the DK slate. I do think that's worthwhile. That's cheap enough where you're getting him for the price of a bat. You're getting your SP2, and there's some strikeout upside. Even if he only goes, 4 and change innings, right? I think there's enough strikeout upside there. So that's one on DK. I would have both sides of FanDuel. I don't need to get to Mackenzie Gore.
Yeah, I mean, outside of Plesac, he's really the super low owned guy that the majority of the field is getting to. We have him at about 20% projection there. So as far as that, I guess the only other thing would be on Wright, how much you're getting to him, if at all.
Probably not. He had a good first start, if I remember correctly, but 8,000 on the FanDuel slate. He was a 17.1. I mean, it's an extremely small sample. I can't use last year. It was only 6 1/3 innings, but he was
6,700 on DK. That's, yeah. I don't know. I mean, why not? You might as well just play Gore at 5K.
Yeah, I think there's more there just based on the strikeout potential. There's also the more potential for him to get just completely tattooed and be out before the first inning's over. But I think there are more strikeouts there. Right. He's, I believe, sub 20% strikeouts for his career, which is kind of a patchwork of innings over the course of time. So he was brought up as kind of a well-regarded prospect, but he's never really delivered on the strikeout rate. Let's see. In his first start, he threw of this season, he went through 6 innings and he struck out 28% of hitters. That's the best he's ever done at the major league level in terms of the strikeout rate. If you believe that that's the Kyle Wright that's going to continue through the season, then he's under-owned on this slate for a cheap price going up against the Padres lineup that I think is overrated. I don't think that's the Kyle Wright that we're going to get throughout most of the season.
Got it. All right. Well, we'll move to Seattle here. Astros have an implied run total of 5. We've got Odorizzi Gonzalez on the hill. So between the Seattle and Astros stack, Odorizzi Gonzalez on the mound, where are you attacking of all 4 of those areas? What are you attacking first?
Yeah, this is another one that's pretty much all about the bats. I don't think I need to get to any shares of Jake Odorizzi. I don't think he's going to go deep into the
Fair
game.
Enough.
And yeah, not a pitcher, not a premium DFS option. Same thing with Marco Gonzalez. I think he'll pitch deeper into the game, but I don't think the strikeouts are going to be there. 18.5% strikeout rate last season, going up against a team that their active roster against left-handed pitching only struck out like 18.1% of the time. So just a spectacular hitting team. Give me both offenses here. I'm happy to stack against these pitchers. I prefer the Astros side of it. I wrote about them in my article today. They were the second featured stack. Any combination.
On a leverage. Whew.
Yeah, they're low owned for their talents. They're expensive, right? They're difficult to get to in combinations on the DK slate. FanDuel, it's a lot easier, friendly, gentle pricing on FanDuel. But you get to Jordan Alvarez if he's in the lineup, under 1% owned on both sites. Yuli Gurriel, always way too low owned, 2,600 to boot on the FanDuel slate for less than 1% ownership. And we're only talking about the American League batting title winner last season. Nothing to see there. Guy who only struck out 11.2% of the time, puts the ball in play constantly, only created runs. I don't have it, but like 30 some odd percent better than average. Any combination of Altuve, Bregman, Yuli Gurriel, Jeremy Pena and Chas McCormick from the back end. And then whichever of the lefties, I expect 2 of the 3, Brantley, Alvarez, and Kyle Tucker to play against the lefty. Brantley would be the guy that I would sit. He goes into a nosedive against lefties where the other two maintain their spectacular quality, but they played Brantley against the last lefty they faced. Who knows? They like his hit tool, but it falls apart against lefties. So I would look for Alvarez or Tucker from the middle of the lineup, grab that power. And these guys are way underrated or way under owned on this slate. On the Mariners side, you're just kind of taking bats against a mediocre Jake Odorizzi. They're fine. They're low owned. They're easy to get to.
A little leverage.
Yeah. So they're all on the DK slate under 5,000, and there are some premium bats in there. You're talking about Mitch Haniger for 4,400, 0.7% ownership going up against Jake Odorizzi. Why aren't we going to $4,400 Mitch Haniger here, guys? 39 home runs last season, created runs 20% better than average, a 252 ISO. What's not to like? Hitting behind Jesse Winker, who had a great season last year, 24 home runs in 485 plate appearances, a 251 ISO, created runs 48% better than average. Put those guys together with Adam Frazier, Ty France up top, JP Crawford, kind of an underrated shortstop. Eunio Suarez is an all or nothing power bat, but still a great, contact profile. He went 198, 286, 428 last season, but he still hit us 31 home runs in what was considered a down year. Still had a 15% barrel rate. Don't leave out Jared Kelnick and Julio Rodriguez, the premium prospect over there. So actually 1 through 9, I'll even bolt on Tommy Murphy and his power at catcher. 1 through 9, the Mariners.
Look at that. See, we found good value here for a team that still has some positive leverage. All right, last game on the slate. We made it, and we even have some time to breathe. In fact, I might even have a minute to fight back on your answer and suggest Christian Slater's Gleaming the Cube for skateboarding. But again, I don't know if you would count that as a technically sport movie. Reds in LA. Dodgers have a super high projected run total at 5 points. The beauty is that I can reference anything, and I know you've seen it probably like 5 times over.
Yeah, of course.
So, exactly. The Dodgers hosted the Reds tonight. Reds, maybe not the offense, the stack you want to get to with Gonsolin. You've got Gutierrez on the mound there for the Reds, but it's the super high run projection that we have for the Dodgers, nearly 6 versus the Reds only at 4. So again, similar question to this game we just discussed here in Seattle. Is there something that's jumping out at you? Maybe the Dodgers stack more so than a Gonsolin play?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's more about the Dodgers bats specifically in this one. I definitely don't need any shares of Vlad Gutierrez here. 17.7% strikeout rate pitcher going up against this Dodgers lineup. No, thanks. Gonsolin's a pitcher I believe in, 27.2% strikeouts and 55 2/3. A highly regarded arm who just kind of needed a role over time. He's bounced a little bit for them between quality innings in the pen, quality innings in the rotation, wherever they needed him as they're bringing him along as a young pitcher. So I just don't know what kind of depth we're going to get from him here. The price is fine on FanDuel if you wanted to take a few shots at 5% ownership. Say he gives you 6 innings against what is a fairly weak Reds lineup. He could get there. I just think the other guys are much more likely. You're more likely to get a premium start out of one of the Rodon, Dylan Cease, Freddie Peraltas of the world, where that's just going to completely knock you out of the box on the one pitcher site. And he's not really priced to be an effective SP2 on DK at 8,400. So I think Gonsolin's mostly off the board, but that doesn't necessarily lead me to the Reds bats. I think he's going to have an effective start. I like the Dodgers pen, and the Reds are largely diminished. I still like Joey Votto in the middle. I still believe in Nick Senzel based on the prospect profile, but he's going to have to deliver this season. Otherwise it's over for him. Tommy Pham is an interesting, power and speed combination when he's healthy. So there's a couple guys in there, but nobody I'm really going out of my way for on the Red side of things. Dodgers bats, it's all about stars from 1 through 7 at least, plus Chris Taylor and Gavin Lux at the back end. Nothing.
Yeah, but really quick, if I could just follow up with the Dodgers stack, because people may look and say, all right, looking at our top stack percentage and see that there's a pretty significant, if it's negative leverage, right? FanDuel, we have them pretty significantly negative leverage team. Same thing with the DK part of me, they're right there at the top. So can you work around that? Are you creating mini stacks, 2-3 man stack, or you just don't give a shit because it's the Dodgers in this matchup and you're going to plow through that?
It's partly that second part. I just think it's too good a spot to, really pass up those bats entirely. Maybe you can undercut the field. I mean, I don't need to get to 30% Max Muncy. Certainly don't need to get to 30% on the top 4 and just go with that route, especially when there's a premium bat in Will Smith hitting 6th, who's only 5.1% owned on the FanDuel slate, 12.4% because he's a catcher and you need catchers on DK. I think Cody Bellinger at 15%. that's pushing it for, where he's just slumped down to, but I'm always happy to get there when he's 3,100. And then Taylor and Lux, like I'm kind of looking at the back end of that. There's a lot of talent. Will Smith, Cody Bellinger, Chris Taylor, Gavin Lux could hit, 2 through 6 for a lot of teams in this league, not necessarily just be at the back end. So with those guys low owned, I think he can get there. The crazy part about the Dodgers, everybody on FanDuel is below 4,000, which is just bananas in this matchup with this lineup. That's crazy.
That's why they're so negatively leveraged.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's why they come up 30% on through the top 4. But at those prices, like you can put it together with so many different good things. You can get different with pitching. You can go a lot of routes to differentiate in baseball. So I'll definitely have a good amount of Dodgers here.
All right, my friend, we did it.
And Gleaming the Cube does count. That's a skateboarding movie for sure. It might have been surpassed. Did you see Jonah Hill's movie mid-90s that came out 3-4 years ago?
No.
Just check it out. It's about, first off, it's about like, our high school days, like when it's a little bit after us. So it's like kids who grew up who were more high school, like 99-ish, probably around there. It's called mid-90s, but it's more later 90s. But it's still like a lot of throwback stuff, a lot of skateboarding focus in it. But yeah, it was a good flick. It's a little indie movie that Jonah Hill made and got well regarded for. A lot of you can tell that he's been a working actor for a long time, who's picked up a lot of tricks from some of the the Scorsese type directors that he's worked with too. I think he's got some directing coming our way from Mr.
Is that
Jonah
right?
Hill.
Okay, I'll check it out now. If it's going to knock off Gleaming the Cube, it's worth a look. I'll leave it at that.
I figured I'd bring it up so that we at least had something to go through there. I don't know if it knocks it off necessarily, but it's on the board.
It's something to think about for the next time you and I.
Gleaming the Cube's got that. I saw that when I was probably the age of those kids, like 10, 12, something like that. That was with the big skateboarding decks back then.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice little throwback for people on a holiday weekend. Absolutely. All right, thanks to everybody.
What about the skateboarding scene in the beginning of Police Academy 4? Remember that? Citizens on Patrol, where they're skateboarding down through the closed car parking garage, and they got the big ramp. I always wanted to be able to do that. David Spade played one of those skateboard punks.
Did he? Jeez, man. Where did he pull this? The only thing I remember from Citizens on Patrol was Sweet Chuck. And they made him a cop. That's the only, I don't know why.
Yeah, him and Zed. Yeah. Because why not? We need the word Bobcat in there. Bobcat's underrated funny guy. But yeah, David Spade was one of the skateboard punks, and they used Tony Hawk, who's like a foot and a half taller than him as a stunt double. Yeah.
Of course they did. Yes, they had to, because he's the only one they knew, right?
Right.
Unbelievable. All right, brother, it's always a pleasure. At Digital Beat 21, at Shander Show for me. Thanks to Mike Awesemo. Hit the thumbs up button. Thank Terry on Twitter when you win a bunch of money. I see people popping in all the time on Twitter. Thank you. I'm watching your shows. Make sure you tag Terry, because he's the one doing all the heavy lifting. Right?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm almost never on Twitter.
Even better. Make sure you hit him up. Have a great holiday weekend, everybody. Enjoy.
You too, bud.